intervention in our democratically elected regional authority. Some people might say stomping all over democracy. That's what Amy Adams, who is getting increasingly by the day more and more like Jackie Deans. That is what Amy Adams, Nicky Wagner and David Carter are doing to our fundamental rights in Canterbury. And Mr. Speaker, the Canterbury members of the House on this side and members of the public in Canterbury are not at all impressed with this. It is an absolute outrage and breach of our democratic rights. We have the right to elect good or bad councillors. We have the vote. And to have that vote taken away from us and then have our water taken away from us because of the regional council, and had no idea at all if Mrs Adams would be voting for it. Mr Speaker, they've just heard her speech written by Aaron Gilmore. They will now have no doubt at all that Amy Adams supports a bill being rammed through this House under urgency to take away the democratic right of people in Canterbury to elect our own regional council. People have watched what Rodney Hyde has done in Auckland with amazement, that he can just ride roughshod over the views of so many good Aucklanders. Well, they didn't even give us a chance to have a say on this. Rammed through under urgency. Not one single moment of select committee consideration. Done deal. We only know the name of one of the councillors. Dame Margaret Baisley is going to be the chief commissioner replacing the council. None of the others are even known. In fact, the minister was so desperate to get this bill into the House that he was still scrambling round with the details before he gave us a briefing at 11:30, and the copy of the bill we got at 11:30 this morning still had draft written on it. Well, Mr Speaker, that is shonky work in this House, ramming through a bill under urgency to take away our democratically elected representatives. So they take away that right, but they also take away the right of the public to have a say. Who knows if it had been put to the test? A lot of people might have said the same sorts of nonsense that Amy Adams said. They would have been entitled to do that at a select committee. That's what democracy and submissions and hearings are all about. But they don't even have a chance to talk nonsense. They're allowed no contribution at all. I was at a meeting recently, Mr Speaker, where another Canterbury member of the National Party was present, the Honourable David Carter, and he described the Creech report. He described the Creech report as coming to the conclusion, and these are his very words, that there was terminal dysfunction at ECAN, and therefore it had to go. Terminal dysfunction. Well, let me just quote from the Creech report. It says, almost all external parties interviewed had a negative perception of ECAN's governance. There is a widely held view that the councillors are polarised at times. Good heavens, that will be gobsmacking news to those of us in Parliament. And they are quite dysfunctional. There is insufficient leadership. The council was too busy protecting individual party perspectives, fails to pay sufficient attention to the region. That's what the 20 external parties reported to Wyatt Creech and his report team, and Wyatt Creech says our investigation did not bear this out. He could not have been clearer in his rejection of the politically motivated criticism of ECAN. I heard one Environment Canterbury councillor quite recently say it was very difficult to operate an environment where often there was a 7-8 vote or an 8-7 vote. Well, Mr Speaker, that's politics. You have people who disagree with each other. It's not party politics. Mrs Wagner, it was exactly the same when she was a councillor.
Oh, she forgot that.
She has absolutely wiped the history books clean. Mrs Wagner, who was an elected representative, I told you, we have the right to vote for whoever we want. Mrs Wagner has forgotten that she was elected to that very same council that she's now allowing to be completely gutted. Mr Speaker, Wyatt Creech's review team went on to say the review found that while the process for debating strongly opposing views has been marred by poor behaviour and reflects past grievances in some cases, the governance of ECAN is functional and enables it to meet its statutory obligations. Mostly the tensions that exist arise from differing political perspectives and not from any fundamental dysfunction. Mr Speaker, that is the organisation described by David Carter in a statement that can only be described as a lie, a complete misrepresentation of the Creech report, as are the comments that are being propagated by the National Party this afternoon and this evening. Wyatt Creech's report said that there were political differences, there was bad behaviour, but they had fundamental ability to carry out their statutory functions. So what is the Minister's response to that? The Minister's response is to say, at last I have my opportunity, firstly to get rid of my former colleague Alec Neil. He's gone yet again. The temptation to do that must be pretty strong from Nick Smith. What Nick Smith has done is entirely politically motivated. It is entirely to get rid of locally elected, democratically elected councillors and have appointed commissioners who will be then able to take over the total control of our water allocation. There is one issue above all others that inspires passion and anger and parochialism more than the Crusaders, Mr Speaker, and that is our right to care for our water. Mr Speaker, the members opposite have no understanding of what has been developed through the Canterbury Water Management Strategy. The member from Selwyn couldn't even refer to it by the correct name. We have been involved in that as representatives for that area, and every single party on a very broad perspective, a very broad spectrum of those interested in water management and water rights have signed up to the strategy. This is the opportunity to put it into legislation. The government could have taken up the offer that I made in front of national members of parliament, in front of the Employers' Chamber of Commerce, that there would be no party politics when it came to legislating the Canterbury Water Management Strategy. So what devious behaviour does the Minister resort to? Sliding it in to legislation that does not give the public any opportunity to contribute, does not even give Cantabrians the opportunity to come and say we're proud of our water management strategy, no select committee process at all. But at the front of this legislation is the abolition of our democratically elected councils. That was a bad thing to do, Mr Speaker, and I use that word advisedly. The Minister knows that he would have had cross-party support for legislation to ensure the smooth transition to a statutory basis for the Canterbury Water Management Strategy. The government should not be replacing democratically elected regional councillors with appointed commissioners. It is a breach of process and it is a breach of our democracy. We should have the Canterbury Water Management Strategy in law, and the Minister should correct that during this process.
Time has expired.